Bizarre Brain Comics. Hello, my comic book friends, and welcome to Bizarre Brain Comics. I am Gary, your host. And this is where I like to take a look at some older comics. Talk a little bit about the characters and creators, and then examine the stories and the art. And this time, I want to take a look at this book, which is not your conventional comic book as far as publication is concerned. This is Starstream, a book published by Whitman, actually by Western Publishing Company, which was Gold Key, but their Whitman imprint from 1976. And with the Whitman imprint, they were sent to not to your regular comic book outlets, but to stuff like your department stores and bookstores and the like that. And it's printed on the cover is printed on a card stock, heavy card stock. And this the cover price on this was 79 cents from 1976. So even then it was just a little bit on the expensive side, but it was also I haven't counted them, but I think it was about 48 pages in that. So it's a little thicker, and it is an anthology book. But this was one of 4 volumes that was printed back then. You can see on the back cover all 4 of them. I think I have 1 or 2 others somewhere. Blast off with Starstream, 4 great first editions, all new comic adaptations of the best stories in the science fiction galaxy. Okay, and this was not just sci-fi stories that they came up with. These were adaptations of stories by established science fiction writers, and also had in this volume 2 stories that were written specifically for this volume. And yeah, that would make this about number 4, because I think this was they were probably published in that order. And whether they did any more or not after this set of 4, I don't know. I'd have to. I really couldn't find much on it. And this volume was edited by Roger Elwood, and he also wrote one of the stories. So the stories were original stories were written by Poul Andersen, Pamela Eckerd, Isaac Asimov, Stephen Golden, Roger Elwood, and Robert Bloch. And this cover painting is not like the regular cover paintings that Gold Key or even Dell at that time, if they would have had. This is a painting more like that what would be done on one of the standard science fiction magazines or a paperback book cover. And this was painted by Kees Romer, whom I have never heard of, but I think I have seen this artist's work elsewhere, and is stylistically really reminds me, might even be the same one, I don't know, really reminds me of some of the cover paintings I have seen on some of the older editions of Lord of the Rings books and other similar fantasy books from this period. What was this? Like an edition of was it the Worm Oribos and King of Elfland's Daughter or something like that. Books like those. Might be the same artist. I don't know. But stylistically, it really reminds me of some of those covers. And they had a variety of artists, and they were artists that were pulled largely from the stable that of artists that Gold Key usually used for their science anthology titles, the mysteries and science fiction stuff. So let's have a little closer look. Okay, there you can see this cover. And inside this table of contents, it's more like a regular book or magazine. Has a a quote, and here's this: "Man is the seeker, accelerating through the Starstream, across the galaxy of galaxies, out of time's time, past the past, and beyond the beyond, from consciousness to cosmic vision, leaving all weights, all measures far behind, as he rides the moving Starstream of the mind." It's by Sir Arthur Thomson. Convocation of the Lunar Astronomical Symposium, April 5th, 2026, on the occasion of the 25th anniversary of the lunar base Genesis. So the quote is entirely fictitious. It hasn't even had the year yet, and of course we're a long way from that. But this first story is a Poul Andersen story. I'm going to look closer into it. Poul Andersen was adapted by George Cashin, and art by Adolf Bolle. I don't know how to pronounce his name. And I really like this story. It says, "Call Me Joe." There's a synthetic life form. This is before, originally from the 50s, 1957. The story, anyway, and it was largely before people realized or knew much about the real science of planetary science, and did not know that, since this takes place on Jupiter, did not know that Jupiter did not have a solid surface. So this takes place on Jupiter. A synthetically grown, engineered being capable of living on Jupiter was developed, sent down there, but is in constant contact, electronically, psychically linked to a person telling him what to do. This is on one of the Jovian moons. And so they had this psychic link, and because this being is not overly bright, and he's exploring. They're trying to make sure that before they can start a colony, make sure that they can survive well enough all the dangers on the planet. But the helmet gizmo keeps fuzzing out. And they're trying to figure out why, and it turns out that it's because he cares too much about Joe. He gets too hyper excited, and because Joe is the being down there, but the guy has got a plan, because he is the controller for Joe. Has a plan, because he is handicapped in a wheelchair and is stuck in a wheelchair and getting old and may not survive much longer on his own. But he's got a plan. He's contacting Joe, teaching Joe stuff, how to survive, how to take care of himself while he's there. But the link also provides for one other thing. He's down there, and while he's down there, they send another being, and someone was listening in on the connection with Joe. So it's some nice artwork. Has a different stylization style. Really very European, if you ask me. And in the process, he sent his mind into the body of Joe, which wound up killing himself. But there Joe was with a female version of himself, but the professor was in the body of Joe. So they had a human consciousness in the body of the synthetic being, and he would help lead and develop a colony, a Jovian colony. And here's another one. This is Pamela Eckerd. This is one that was written specifically for this edition, and with art by Frank Bolle, who we've talked about several times before. Ben Franklin, Martian, and it's a quaint little story. And it turns out that an alien had come to Earth, and Ben Franklin, as a child, was accidentally killed doing an experiment. He took Ben Franklin's place, grew up, did all the things that Franklin did. It turns out because this was part of a school project for this alien, and he got trapped there. So finally he was whisked away, and he failed his project, but he was Benjamin Franklin. And here's another one. This is Isaac Asimov. Does a Bee Care? Adapted by A. Moniz, with art by Jack Abel. I've talked about Jack Abel many times. He used to do the primary artist on Kid Colt, Outlaw for Marvel for several years. Did some of the Hot Rod comics for Charlton. And through the 70s and 80s, he was primarily saw his work as an inker rather than a penciler. And this page does not want to go. And it's just a nice one about an alien actually helping scientists without his knowledge on their rocket project. And he's been there and helping people all throughout history because he's trapped here. It's a little bit like Ben Franklin story. All throughout history till it got to a point when he could. This is how their people procreate. They send something on, send their egg on the Earth on a planet, and they do stuff. So it's like does a bee? It's like pollination. Does a bee care about the plant that he's pollinating? There's a nice place to visit by Stephen Golden and Jose Delbo. I've talked about several times before. Did Wonder Woman for a while in the late 70s. Again, decent art. He also did the Flash part of the Buck Rogers, which I had covered before. Here's Report to the Plenary Council regarding a recent nuclear malady and subsequent threat to human survival. And this is by Roger Elwood, who is the editor. And this is was a really nice, really good story. I enjoyed this one, with art by Al McWilliams, who was one of the artists on Goldkey's Star Trek series, as well as doing some of the Flash Gordon. And this is and this was written specifically for this volume as well. I like this one. Look like mutated monsters coming up to attack people, but they're not really. They're just trying to warn them not to do any more nuclear tests, or we're going to wipe you guys out, because their tests are threatening their underground civilization. And some nice artwork, and it's a very interesting story. Although I don't think the general would have been able to actually do that, convince him. And then rounds out with And the Blood Ran Green, a story by Robert Bloch, adapted by Arnold Drake, and art by Nevio Zakara. Now this is, again, this artist, I don't see his work that often in these old ones, but he was always there. He was the artist, the very first comic artist to do a Star Trek comic story. Yes, for Star Trek #1 for Gold Key, after which it was done, taken over by Alberto Giolitti, who did a much better job of it, I do believe. But he is quite a fine, this Italian fellow also is quite a fine artist. I just don't think his work was nearly as good as Giolitti's for Star Trek. This is on a plant planet, and this is not unlike the story in a way that was done for that first issue of Star Trek. Really, it crashed, and turns out the people are transforming into plants, and that is it for Starstream. This is the volume 4, Starstream from Whitman, Western Publishing Company. Basically Gold Key without the Gold Key name. And these are a fine introduction to legitimate science fiction. When I say legitimate, I mean prose and classic science fiction for younger readers. Introduce them to it, and maybe after seeing something like this, they would be interested in reading the books and short stories that these stories were based on. So, I want to thank you for joining me, and please like, share, subscribe. Share this with your other science fiction aficionado friends. Yes, they should get a kick out of it, especially if they're like Asimov or Paul Andersen fans. And do leave a comment. Have you seen some of the other volumes of this title? And what other stories did they adapt? Thank you. Do leave a comment, and we'll see you next time. And remember, as this shows clearly, comics are art.